Well, our speaker today is the pastor of our center here, and he is quite the gentle giant. He has been a blessing to us since he came here 4 years ago, 5 years ago, and we're so lucky to have him. And he's going to share with his thoughts about mothers today. So anyway, let's welcome Reverend Brian Walker.
So Mrs. Giordano is visiting her son Anthony and his female roommate Maria. And, Mrs. Giordano has always been a little bit suspicious about this relationship. And during dinner, she notices how pretty Maria is. Now, her son, who is really tuned into her, is really kind of getting this vibe. And he reassures her and says, "Mom, Maria and I are just roommates." And so about a week later, Maria says to Anthony, "I can't find the sugar bowl ever since your mom's been here. You think that she took it?" And Anthony goes, "No, but I'll email her." And so he writes this email and says, "Dearest Mama, I'm not saying that you took the sugar bowl, and I'm not saying that you didn't take the sugar bowl. But the fact remains that since you were here last week, we can't find the sugar bowl." And Mrs. Giordano writes back, "Figlio mio." Huh? That's Italian. "Figlio mio. I'm not saying that you do sleep with Maria. And I'm not saying that you don't sleep with Maria. But the fact remains, if Maria were sleeping in her own bed, she'd have found the sugar bowl by now." So that's in celebration of all of you mothers. So I don't know about you, but when I was growing up, I had that feeling that my mother knew everything. And that, when I was a little kid, there was nothing I could get away with. And I grew up in a military family, and my dad was a colonel in the Air Force. But we knew who the general in the family was. My mother was a very strong personality. And so in one sense, my relationship with my mother has really dominated my whole life. It's really been the most impactful. And I think that, mothers get blamed for a lot of stuff that they really may not be responsible for. And I might be guilty of that, or at least have been guilty of that. In one of the Golden Girls episodes, one of them said, "It's not easy being a mother. If it were, fathers would do it." But when I think about my spiritual journey, it's really been a lot about coming to peace with my mother, who was, maybe a little bit on the controlling side, and a very devout Catholic. And I blamed her for some of the wounds that I got in my Catholic upbringing. And one of the great blessings that I got from going to ministerial school was that the school actually funded the students to go to a therapist, which I think was really very smart. Very smart. That's a really good investment. It was part of what was referred to during our ministerial education as the hidden curriculum. Anyway, so I, through my pastoral instructor, I got connected with one of a Gestalt therapist in the Kansas City area who was very well known and highly respected. And so after I'd been seeing him for some time, he shared a revelation with me that really helped me understand myself and some of my past behavior. But he told me, he said, "You're afraid to be in a relationship with a woman." And that, some of the lights just kind of went on, and it was directly related to the relationship that I had with my mother. That I was afraid that I might be consumed by somebody I was in a relationship with. Anyway, during one of the sessions that we had, we're doing this role-playing exercise where I'm sitting in a chair, and in an empty chair next to me, I'm having this kind of dialogue with my mother. And he's kind of leading me through this, in which I'm having an experience where I really object very strongly to some of the limits, or from my perception, controlling behavior of my mother. And so after we are kind of going through this for a while, and he says, "Well, how do you feel about your mother? Is there anything you'd like to do to your mother?" And I reached over off the couch and got a pillow, and big pillow, and smacked the chair, and it went end over end. And whoa, I had this amazing feeling of relief over me, and I kind of looked over, and he seemed quite satisfied at what I had done. But it was an experience that I had of really doing something that we all need to do, and that's draw some healthy boundaries. And during my growing up and well into my adult years, I hadn't done that, and going through this process really helped me with that. The other aspect of this was, the feelings of wounding that I had during my Catholic upbringing. And so, during my ministerial process and leading up to that and even following that, so learning a lot about forgiveness work and doing that inner work, so that I really learned that that was all part of my human experience here, and actually had treasures in it. We have these really golden gifts that we sometimes are not in touch with, because we are not willing to get in touch with them because of feelings of shame or guilt or resentment, whatever, all those feelings that we hold that keep us from really getting in touch with our deepest self. And so during that process, I also came to peace with my mother and with the Catholic Church, and have since learned about some really inspiring and really wonderful Catholic priests and other Catholics who I admire and are an inspiration to me, such as Father Thomas Keating, Father Richard Rohr, Father Bede Griffiths. Bede Griffiths is a Camaldolese monk and author who went to India and created an ashram there based on Hindu and Christian principles. And he's a representative of the monastery that's up in Big Sur. There are Camaldolese monks up there. And, Kathy and I go there for retreats frequently. And what I can appreciate now is, the gifts that my mother gave me, including my Catholic experience, which really contains some very deep, powerful experiences for me. But I mean, just on the mother level, it was, she was a wonderful homemaker, a great cook. She was there for us all the time. I mean, when we got home from school, we never knew what a working mom was. She was there for us when we got home from school with, the cookies and all that kind of stuff. And when we were in Cub Scouts, she was the den mother. And when we played ball, she was at the ball games. It was, it's so much. I mean, I know that she loved me and my two brothers the best way that she could. Her sons were everything to her. So anyway, so Mom, I know you're here in spirit. Thank you for all you've given me, and I love you, and I appreciate all you've done for me, and I celebrate you on this day. So thank you. So somebody has defined motherhood as a choice that you make every day to put someone else's happiness and well-being ahead of your own, to teach the hard lessons, to do the right thing even when you don't know what the right thing is, and to forgive yourself over and over and over again for doing everything wrong. You know, a state trooper, when he was taking an exam, was faced with this question: what would you do if you had to arrest your mother? And so in the blank space provided, he wrote 3 words: call for backup. So I want to tell you a little story, and this is a story that to me really represents the spirit of motherhood. So in the early 1800s, John Todd was born in Rutledge, Vermont, into a family of 5 children. And at a very young age, both of John's parents died, and the relatives wondered what they were going to do with these kids. And so as they're, farming them out, one dear aunt says, I'll take little John. And so she sent a horse and a driver out to pick him up, who was only 6 years old at the time. And the driver Caesar came, and he put the little boy back up on the back of the horse with him, and started to take him to his aunt's place. And so on the way there, they had this conversation. Little John says, "Will she be there?" And Caesar says, "Oh yeah, she'll be there waiting for you." "Will I like her?" "My son, you have fallen into good hands." "Will she love me?" "Oh yes, she has a big heart." "Will I have my own room? Will I have a puppy?" "She's got everything all set for you, son, and I think she's got some surprises." "Do you think she'll go to bed before we get there?" "Oh no, she'll be sure to wait up there. You'll see when we get out of these woods. You'll see the candle shining in the window." So when they got through the clearing, sure enough, there was a candle in the window, and she was standing in the doorway. She fed him supper, took him to his room, and stayed in the room with him until he fell asleep. And John Todd grew up with her as his second mother, and he eventually became a minister. And it awed him that she had given him a second home, become a second mother to him. And years later, long after he'd left, his aunt wrote to him telling him of her impending death. Her health was failing, and she wondered what was to become of her. And this is what John Todd wrote to her: "My dear aunt, years ago I left a house of death, not knowing where I was to go, whether anyone cared, whether it was the end for me. The ride was long, but the driver encouraged me. Finally, he pointed out your candle to me, and there we were in the yard. You embraced me and took me by the hand into my own room that you had made up. After all these years, I still can't believe it, how you did all that for me. I was expected. I felt safe in that room, so welcomed. It was my room. Now it's your turn to go. And as one who has tried it out, I'm writing to let you know that someone is waiting up. Your room is all ready. The light is on. The door is open. And don't worry, Auntie, you're expected. I know. I once saw God standing in your doorway long ago. And so that to me represents the spirit of motherhood. Um, a famous Indian saint of the 20th century, Anandamaya Ma, she said, with the power of motherhood within her, a woman can influence the entire world. The love of awakened motherhood is a love and compassion felt not only towards one's own children, but toward all people, animals and plants, rocks and rivers, a love extended to all beings. And friends, what I see in this world that seems to be so chaotic and so topsy-turvy sometimes is that this awakened motherhood is what is happening. And that it is a process that we're going through in which we're going to balance this male and female energies. And that awakened motherhood is calling us to task. And we're stumbling our way through, but we can do it. So another example of this spirit of motherhood that I see is kind of embodied in a Saturday Evening Post cartoon from many years ago. So a young boy is on the telephone. He's 5 or 6. And the caption reads, "Mom is in the hospital. The twins and Rose and Billy and Sally and the dog and me and Dad are all home alone." But that's the kind of glue that the spirit of motherhood has, is that it provides those boundaries and also that glue, that unconditional, loving, nurturing glue that keeps everything all together. So anyway, wherever your mother is and whatever your relationship is, I hope that you honor her today. God bless you.